Listen, I'd be lying if I said I knew what was going on in this show. There's probably gonna be some moments where you're confused, and honestly, I'm confused too, bruh. So if you haven't seen it, just sit back and enjoy the ride. Our story starts off in this classroom where we just see this teacher trying to write on the chalkboard, but he's trembling. The narrator, who shows up a lot during this series, just says the first one who noticed were the delinquents. Everybody is shaking and can't understand why. The teacher has everybody raise their hand if they can't stop trembling, and everybody raises it but one. We see this kid sitting in the back of the classroom completely dozing off. This is the main character of our story, Baki Hanma. Fast forward a little bit and we're outside the school as we see Baki getting pressed by these hoodlums. They're trying to press Baki about why he's got these injuries, but in the middle of them trying to press him, they start trembling as well. And the narrator just says these three weren't fit to be delinquents. It just wasn't in their DNA. Once again, the only person who's not trembling is Baki. He just says that they're done here, so he'll be going. But before he makes his leave, one of the hoodlums just asks, who exactly is he? Baki says he's nobody special. Them getting involved is just a waste of time. As long as they don't mess with him, he won't mess with them. He makes his leave as they're all just sitting there sweating after realizing the true strength between the two of them. The narrator says that sometimes the ability to assess the situation is more important than your ability to fight. They clearly have zero business messing with Baki, and them being able to realize that just saved their lives. The next thing that we see is a little bit later, and this limo pulls up. Stepping out of it is the head of the Tokugawa family. Mr. Tokugawa here is the ruler of the underground fight arena. Tokugawa makes his way to the principal's office, and as Baki pulls up, he greets him real casually. Baki's just asking him what he wants, and everybody's shocked to hear Baki talking to Mr. Tokugawa like this. They're all scared of this man, knowing what kind of man he is and the type of connections that he has, but Baki doesn't seem to be worried. Tokugawa doesn't care that Baki's talking to him like this. He just wants a moment alone so they can have a little chat. As everybody clears the room, he puts this container on the table, explaining that this is crystallized nitroglycerin, aka an explosive. He continues to tell Baki this story about nitroglycerin and how 100 years ago it was a substance that would not crystallize under any situation. But this random boat, which was filled with nitroglycerin, hits this typhoon. In every other circumstance, this much of an explosive chemical would easily explode under the slightest movement, but surprisingly, the ship managed to make it to land safely. And as they opened up the barrels to check on the explosives, they saw the very first instance of crystallized nitroglycerin. Tokugawa continues to explain that this wasn't the only occurrence of this happening. Ever since that day, nitroglycerin all around the world began to crystallize, which up until that point had never happened. He chalks this all up to one very important word: synchronicity. Synchronicity is a group of seemingly unrelated objects all undergoing the same change on a global scale. And that is why he's come here to see Baki today. Tokugawa explains that a group of very strong men, beasts if you will, are all gonna arrive here in Tokyo within the next few days. We get a view of the first beast, this man, being sentenced to death. He's being transported by all types of officers, and they're all talking about him, saying that you gotta stay at least a few meters away from him under any circumstance. Don't try and talk to him, don't speak about him, don't look at him, nothing. Mind you, this man is restrained under all types of belts, ropes, he's blindfolded, he can't move an inch. But all of the officers here, who are all armed with all types of weapons and armor and protection, are all still worried. They end up putting this man to be hanged as a priest comes asking if he has any last words. The man just smiles, saying, "I want to taste defeat." They turn the lever and the man just falls, struggling until he gives up. The law states that when a prisoner is hanged, he must stay there for 10 minutes and then a doctor will come and check to confirm their death post-execution. So once a doctor pulls up, he grabs his stethoscope, putting it up to the prisoner's neck, but he hears a pulse. The man just opens his eyes, scaring everybody as he dashes through, kicking 2 of the guards' heads off in an instant. He kills 2 more of them as through pure muscle alone, he breaks through everything that was restraining him. He says it's always the same. Everything is just too easy for him. As more guards go in there to check on the facility, they see everybody who was in that room dead, hung up on this rope, with a message written in blood on the wall saying, "Gentlemen, I'll see you in Tokyo." The alarms sound all across the facility, but by then, the man had already made his escape as he's swimming across this ocean, making his way to Japan. Cut back to real time and we just see Baki trembling, not out of fear, but out of excitement and awe. He just says, "Amazing." But Mr. Tokugawa says that's just the beginning of the issue. Over at another prison, we see another one of these beasts, once again here for execution. He's sitting in this electric chair as he's already told the executioner what he wants his last words to be. Once again, "I want to taste defeat." The executioner is going on about how death is guaranteed, and while only for a minute before he dies, he will in fact get to taste defeat, so his wish will eventually be granted. They push the button, turning on the chair as dude is getting electrocuted, blood's coming out of his eyes, he's foaming out the mouth, and finally, once they turn it off, dude's body is just steaming. The executioner walks up as he breaks out of all of his confinements, appearing behind the 2 guards at the door, smashing their heads together as he stares down the executioner. He pulls out his gun, but as he shoots, dude with the blindfold on this entire time smashes his head in, catching the gun in his mouth. After he finally takes the blindfold off to look at the damage he's done, he says, funnily enough, if they had waited just 10 more seconds to shut it off, his wish would have finally came true. He just leaves the facility, meeting this pilot to his private jet as they make their way over to Tokyo. Over with beast number 3, we're in Russia, and the prisoner who was sentenced to death in this hole had escaped by climbing up with his bare hands. Everybody's shocked because this manhole is over 100 meters deep, but they immediately go out on a search for him. They stop to check in on a nearby village, seeing one of Russia's most esteemed fighters, Garland, brutally killed by this beast who escaped. He also left a message that he's going out east to Tokyo, saying that he wants to taste defeat. 3 of these beasts, these death row convicts, have been introduced, but there's 2 more. Over with beast number 4, we see a man getting prepped to go and interview him. He's forced to damn near take off everything before meeting this criminal. He's taking off his belt, his watch, a pen he had on him, his lighter, his tie pin, everything. He's kind of upset because he's got to take all of this off. It's just embarrassing, explaining that he's a black belt in karate and this criminal is behind this bulletproof acrylic enclosure. All of this is a little bit much, but the officer who was briefing him just showed him a picture of what happened to the last guy who tried to interview him, and it wasn't pretty. They start to make their way towards the enclosure as the interviewer is instructed to stick very close to the wall and don't listen to anything he has to say outside of answering his questions. The interviewer is hella nervous walking up, but as he turns to look inside the enclosure, he can't believe it. He drops his pants because he had to take his belt off as he calls out to the guard saying that the prisoner isn't here. From the vents above, he grabs the interviewer by the neck, killing him immediately as he tells the guards that he's going out to Japan in order to taste defeat. The officer can't believe it. He doesn't know what he's talking about because they're 200 meters underwater, but we just see this beast swimming up to shore as he easily defeated everybody in the Coast Guard, sitting there smoking a cigarette. Finally, with beast number 5, he's in this ultra high-tech enclosure just writing. We hear these 2 guards talking about some of his crimes. One of the guards is explaining that this enclosure was from the Ministry of Defense. It was built in order to withstand impacts from rockets, so there's no way that this dude could break through. But as the beast finishes writing, he walks up to the glass, asking the officers if they know what the most poisonous gas in the world is. They pull out their guns, telling the beast not to move, but he's wondering what's the use in pointing guns at this bulletproof enclosure. They was just talking about how this was meant to withstand the impact of rockets, so what is this little gun gonna do? But for him, this glass might as well be regular glass. He puts his hand up to the enclosure, saying that he can just create a tiny little vacuum between his hand and the glass, and by rotating it, he can destroy it. He breaks through, killing the first dude with the gun by chopping him on both sides of the neck at the same time, telling the other officer that the most poisonous gas in the world is this one, as he puts his mouth up to bro's ears, blowing through, forcing all of his brains and all type of organs and insides out through his other ear. He escapes the prison, as we see on this piece of paper that he's heading out to Japan in order to taste defeat. Finally, back in real time, Mr. Tokugawa explains that this is also Synchronicity. 5 unrelated death row convicts all left the same message behind, saying that they're coming to Tokyo in order to taste defeat. He explains that they all killed these people while in prison without weapons, so they must be combat fighters. And if they're all coming to Japan, they're all coming here to fight him. Mr. Tokugawa says that the underground martial arts world and the criminal underworld are all coming here for an all-out war, and he couldn't be more excited. Out somewhere at this park, we see one of the beasts, Doyle, picking a fight with this famous kickboxer who was out doing his road work. The kickboxer grabs Doyle's collar with his hands, but instantly goes up in blood, as Doyle's got these razors all along the inside of his shirt, as he just slices him across the neck with this steel razor implanted in his elbow. He instantly puts him down, as we get to see that it's just a completely different level of fighting between regular boxers and fighters and wrestlers, and these beasts. They're on 2 different playing fields. It's night and day. Fast forward a bit, and we see these hoodlums from earlier in the episode being pressed by all types of people who are after Baki. They all heard about Baki's strength and want to get the best of him, but these guys are just regular men. They're no beasts. The delinquents get Baki to pull up on all of these guys who are here to kill him. The first dude walks up with his knife, as Baki just imagines what he's gonna do to him, and as dude walks up to Baki, getting close enough, he immediately gets this premonition of what would happen if he took one step closer. Baki just smiles, saying that he's got enough courage to come and slash him down, but he's not prepared to get his face caved in. Dude from behind tries to sneak Baki with this weight that he's throwing around, but Baki catches it and he starts trying to go all out. You could tell he's put in a lot of work with these weights, but right before one's about to hit Baki, he sticks his finger out, causing the weight to wrap around one more time, hitting this dude in the face, causing him to give up. The final person who was here to kill Baki ends up getting his knife taken, as he was trying to show off and confuse Baki through his speed, but he just hands him his knife back, saying that he was too slow. He should just get on somewhere. We can see the difference between Baki and all of these beasts who are on death row. Everybody else had no problem killing anybody who even tried him, but Baki, up against people who were out to kill him, just embarrassed them and sent them on their way. Finally, one of the hoodlums pull up with his gun, pointing at Baki, asking him if he's ready to die. I don't know why everybody's so ignorant and just aggressive for no reason. Baki has literally done no wrong up until this point, but Baki just looks at him shocked, not at the gun, but at one of the criminals standing behind him. This dude is Spec. He's easily like 7 feet tall, as Baki asks him if he's one of the beasts who came to Tokyo in order to taste defeat. The hoodlum has no clue what Baki's talking about, but as he turns around, he starts aiming his gun towards Spec. But Spec just asks him to hand him over the gun. They both know that shooting him isn't gonna do anything, so the hoodlum just hands it over. Spec puts the gun up to his own cheek, shooting through like 5 or 6 times, exhaling all the steam out his mouth and his nose and the new holes in his cheeks, as he explains that he heard the strongest man in the world lives in Japan, and turns out it's just a 17-year-old kid. Spec extends his hand in order to shake Baki's, and as he does, it falls off to the ground. Spec just starts laughing, saying that that's so rude and improper. You shouldn't have just dropped the hand of somebody like that. Everybody's shocked, as Spec just kicks Baki, grabbing his head and slamming it into the ground, starting to repeatedly stomp him out as he's just having a blast. Baki's just lying there on the ground until the police show up, putting Spec in handcuffs. But he easily breaks them, walking up to Baki, saying that this was just an introduction. He extends his hand once again, asking Baki not to disappoint him, saying that the next time they meet, it'll be for real. They shake hands as Spec just kicks him in the face, laughing as he allows himself to get arrested and taken to jail by the cops. Elsewhere in Japan, we just hear a news report on this exact situation of these 5 convicts all making their way to Japan at the same time, and as we see the man watching, we get an introduction to Yujiro Hanma. Known as the world's strongest creature, this is Baki's father. We don't get to see too much of him as we fast forward to seeing another one of the convicts, Yanagi. He's here meeting with his old teacher, Shibukawa. We get a little bit of a backstory of him. He is a living legend, founder of the Shibukawa style of jujitsu. He tells Yanagi that it's been a while, wondering if he wants to fight for old time's sake, as Yanagi just laughs, saying that martial arts fighters are so naive. Instead of asking for a fight, they should just attack. He takes the tea kettle that was in front of him, throwing it at Shibukawa, pointing a needle directly at his eye, forcing Shibukawa into defeat. Over with Spec, he's in his cell saying that this place isn't too bad, so he might as well set up camp here for a while. Over in an office at that prison, the chief in command is giving a breakdown on Spec, telling them not to treat him as a human. Think of him more as a highly intelligent beast. He's not like anything they've ever come into contact with, so they should be aware of that. After the meeting, he leaves to go and use the bathroom, and right next to him is Spec, just sitting there using the urinal. He don't know what Spec's doing here. He should be in his cell, but Spec is like, what? Everybody got the right to use the bathroom, so what's the problem? He hands the chief officer a gift, these little Chinese buns from the supermarket next door. He grabs them and hands it to him, mind you, without washing his hands right after using the bathroom. That's so disrespectful. The officer tries to attack, but Spec easily stops him, forcing the bun into his mouth once again without having washed his hands after using bruh. Crazy. Over with the next beast, we see Dorian. He's walking in on these 2 people fighting as he says he's here to see Master Doppo. One of the guys who was fighting just says that's okay, but at the very least have some respect and take off your shoes before entering. Dorian's like, oh, of course, that's my bad, and takes his shoes off, tossing it towards the man, following up with the kick. But my man's right here is not a pushover. He lands on his feet as Dorian kneels down, sticking his fingers into bro's eyes, taking his black belt off and choking him with it. But he manages to free himself, following up with his signature move as all of his students in the gym are impressed. But Dorian finishes it by sending a wooden board straight through his throat. It wasn't much of a fight, but Dorian is impressed, saying that if he's a student of Master Doppo, then he's got something to look forward to. He's trying to walk off, but is interrupted by Retsu, the man who had won that fight earlier. He tells Dorian to step back into the center of the ring. There's no way he's just gonna up and disrupt their fight and then leave like that. But out of nowhere, Dorian starts crying for some reason. He's saying thank you over and over, but as he goes to wipe his nose, he takes one of his nose hairs out, throwing it towards Retsu, but he was able to react quick enough to dodge it. He responds with a kick as we see that he just barely dodged the attack from Dorian, with the nose hair landing on his eyelid instead of his eye. Dorian just laughs, saying that he's pretty strong, taking out his flask of alcohol. He says that the next time they fight, it should be more proper, as he dumps the alcohol in a circle around him, as he puts a little bit more in his mouth, taking out the lighter and spitting the alcohol through, acting as this flamethrower as he makes his escape, and Retsu is just sitting there pissed. We've officially been introduced to 3 of the 5 beasts, as we take a little break from that and we see a little bit more of Baki. He's here in regular gym class as they're doing these fitness tests, and he thinks to himself that this is the first time he's ever done something like this. But we see that as he goes through all these fitness tests, Baki is just too physically strong and dominant to be measured in any type of way. During the long jump, he's jumping over the entire pit, so they can't measure how far he jumped. In the pull-up test, he's breaking the bar as he's trying to do it. It's just ridiculous. The teacher's looking at his grades and he's essentially failed all 4 of them as it comes down to the final one, the 1500 meter run. He's telling Baki that at this rate, he's gonna fail the class, but they end up striking a deal saying that if Baki can beat the world record for the 1500 meter run, then he'll pass the test. But the teacher one-ups Baki, saying that if he can manage to do that, he'll give him A's in all of his classes. So after finding out the world record is 3 minutes and 26 seconds, Baki lines up to do his run. He takes off his gym uniform and seeing underneath, of course, this man is built crazy. The teacher starts to count down, and once the run starts, Baki begins strong. He sees Baki continue to pass these laps, and the teacher can't believe what he's seeing. He's thinking that unless he miscounted already, then Baki set the world record for the 400 meter and the 800 meter and the 1000 meter. He's beating all types of records. At this point, Baki feels like his muscles are really starting to warm up, but also we could see the problem with Baki's strength. Obviously, he trains, but throughout his whole life, he's trained for strength, not for speed. Baki begins to get muscle cramps, and from his point of view, it feels as if he's pulling tons of weights around his ankles, and since he wasn't able to pace himself, Baki finishes the run in last place. But seeing that he beat all those other records, the teacher still passes him. We fast forward to a restaurant and we see a man named Mr. Igari presenting this new fighter to Mr. Tokugawa. Now, one thing that's hilarious about this show is that they introduce people by flashbacks to their fights with Baki. They introduced Igari as this great fighter who ended up facing Baki in the 3rd round of the maximum tournament and was defeated. Dude ends up interrupting Igari in the middle of one of his points that he was trying to make, asking him when his next match is going to be. He wants to get straight to fighting. So Mr. Tokugawa asks him when he wants the fight to be. Dude says that all he needs is a ring, prize money, and an opponent. If they got those 3 things, he's ready at any time. Tokugawa reminds him that all of his fights have no prize money whatsoever, but dude knows that if you win one of these fights, you get all types of glory and fame, and the money will eventually follow. But out of nowhere, this dude places all the plates that he had eaten on top of his head, saying that he decides when the fight starts. This is one of the beasts, Sakorski, the one from Russia who escaped that giant manhole. This up-and-coming fighter tries to press him, but he escapes his grip, slashing him 3 times across the face, leaving these marks inches deep. Dude just falls dead to the floor as Sakorski says, if you need to be told when to fight, you're not a real fighter. A match in the ring is, at the very best, only a rehearsal for the real thing. As they step outside, we see that dude gets taken away in an ambulance as Igari tries to press Sakorski, but of course, he stands no chance. Igari tells him that one day he's gonna regret this, but Sakorski drop kicks Igari into the ambulance, slashing him 3 more times across the face in the same manner that he did his student. Igari falls to the ground and Sakorski ends up getting in the car with Tokugawa as they head towards the Coliseum. As they make it there, all of the other beasts pull up at the same time, and mind you, none of them orchestrated this. They didn't communicate with each other at all. This is all playing into the theme of synchronicity. Tokugawa asks why they all came here, and they each give their individual reasons. None of them have any that really stand out. I don't think it matters too much, but Tokugawa says as a gift, he'll give them all the taste of defeat. Spec says he doesn't need a gift from Tokugawa. There's plenty of lovely ones right here. They all start sizing each other up as Tokugawa tries to get them to stop because he wants his fighters to pull up, and in the nick of time, we hear up from the stands, Baki calling his name. Baki is asking if they could hurry up with this. He's got school in the morning. He don't got free time to be wasting on no bull. And everybody instantly notices and recognizes him as we hear from behind. Doppo pulls up with the rest of Tokugawa's fighters. They all match up, and Mr. Tokugawa gives a little bit of context. He explains the maximum tournament in which the 38 fighters competed in this very coliseum that they're standing in. He believes that it was the greatest martial arts tournament in history, and the winner of said tournament was this kid right here, the 17-year-old Baki Hanma. Everybody instantly glares towards him as Mr. Tokugawa calls back to what Sakorski had said earlier about matches only being practiced at the very best. You should be ready to fight at any time. And Mr. Tokugawa agrees. Real world combat is completely different, which is why he brought these 5 beasts here today. They all wish to taste defeat, and Mr. Tokugawa believes that each of his fighters can give that to them. Baki's confused because he never agreed to fight in the first place, but out the side, Doppo and Shibukawa agree that fights shouldn't be right here in the Coliseum. They should be when they're going on about their daily life. Whenever they feel like attacking, go ahead and attack and fight to the death. No rules or any other conditions as to how this should be done. Regardless of whether you're sleeping, eating, you're with your family, or you're in bed with a girl, it doesn't matter. These are real fights, and that's just how a real fight works. After the whole breakdown, Baki couldn't care less. He's just like, alright, well, I'm gonna go to bed. I got an early start for school tomorrow, so I'm gonna just head out. We can already tell Baki is not to be played with, right? Not only did he win the maximum tournament, but he's here in front of all of these people, and he could not care less. After Baki leaves, we get a view of Sakorski imagining fighting all 5 of them, saying that he's real thankful for the opportunity. After everybody leaves, we see that Spec went back to that prison in order to go to sleep, and the officers can't believe what they're seeing. They have no choice but to accept that Spec can just come and go whenever he pleases. The first fight that we see is Dorian versus Doppo. Dorian is thankful that Doppo isn't wasting any time when it comes to starting this fight. We also get to see, walking up to them, Retsu. Dorian thanks Retsu for their little altercation earlier, as Retsu says he's ready to start right here, right now. Doppo just takes his bag off, smashing it into Dorian's face, as through the jumble of various items, we see Dorian with this demonic look on his face. Doppo hits Dorian with a kick, immediately putting him on his knees. But getting a closer look at Dorian, he's got his lighter in hand and uses this little flamethrower technique from earlier. He's blasting Doppo with all these flames, but Doppo is repelling them all with this hand rotation technique. He says that this rotation defense is the most legendary defensive technique. Whether he's using missiles, fire, guns, it doesn't matter. Doppo is ready for it all. We skip this fight to go over and see Sakorski. Igari pulls back up on him as his face is all bandaged up, saying that little punch technique that he used back there wasn't half bad. But now it's time for revenge. Sakorski notices that Igari brought 2 of his little henchmen with him, and they're not here to play. They start whooping on Sakorski real easily as they shove something in his mouth, tape his lips shut, and tell Igari that they're gonna take him back to the dojo. Back to the Dorian fight, we just see him slice Doppo's hand off. He goes on this rant about this special wire that he used. He says since the dawn of history, scientists always improve to make things better, and this is the peak of what's available. He got this off the black market, and supposedly this little wire that he used is as strong as titanium. Now, both Doppo and Retsu recognize why he let Doppo get that kick in so effortlessly. He had used that time to wrap the wire around Doppo's wrist so that he could cut it off whenever he felt like. Dorian asks Doppo if he still wants to continue, but Doppo just tells a story about how he used to train. He used to do this thing called spear hand training, which is sticking your hand through this spear of bamboo. Because of it, his fingers would go through all types of fractures and dislocations. It was hell. But Doppo says he used to wish that he could get rid of his fingers and then he could strike at full force. He attacks Dorian with his arm that had just had the hand cut off as Dorian gets sent flying back. Back over with Sakorski, he's over here with Igari and his henchmen as Igari pulls out this gun and starts lighting them up. He's not here to play no games, but Sakorski just jumps off the ropes that they had tied him up in as he runs, killing one of Igari's henchmen with ease, slashing him twice across the face and once more through the neck. The other henchman tries to retaliate. I don't know why, but of course he's easily packed up as well. With both of his henchmen already defeated, Igari just surrenders. He gets into this pose saying that in his culture, this means 100% surrender. He's saying that Sakorski's speed, power, and stamina are just all too much. He doesn't stand a chance. But Sakorski gets into a pose of even greater surrender. I don't know, 110% surrender, I guess. I'm thinking it was just to prove that he knew Igari didn't really mean to surrender at all. He gets up, kicking Igari in the face as he just starts trying to crawl away. But Sakorski picks up this bar with hella plates on it and starts swinging it around, absolutely doing this man Igari terribly. He's throwing dumbbells at him and we just see blood flying around. Once he realizes that Igari's dead, he unzips his pants and starts to relieve himself on this man. I don't know, bruh. This is Baki for you. But out of nowhere, Igari shoots up like, I got you now. But Sakorski, presumably with his meat out, slashes this dude 3 more times, finally finishing the job. The next thing that we see is Baki out on a date with this girl, Kozue. This is one of his classmates who he seemingly had this little on-off thing with for a while. She tells Baki that she was honestly surprised when he asked her out, but Baki says he had really wanted to do so for a while now. She just tells Baki that not only is he good at fighting, but he's also good at making a girl happy. But out of nowhere, in the middle of their talk, they get interrupted by these random thugs. They're over here trying to mug Baki, pulling out this knife, but as they look into Baki's eyes, they all instantly back off. Baki just tells them that they'll be leaving, and surely it won't be a problem, right? They clear a path for my mans to walk through, and the one dude who didn't get a look into Baki's eyes, who had his arm around his shoulder, gets flung around in a complete circle, landing back safely on his feet as Baki just fixes his hat and continues walking with Kozue on their date. Throughout the day, they seem to have a great time. They go out to eat, they go shopping, they sit down and talk, just a overall good day. And later that night, they're walking, holding hands for the very first time. But we just see, watching them, is Spec. Kozue starts talking to Baki, reminiscing on a moment they had before the second round of the Maximum Tournament, which Baki fought in. She's saying that after watching the tournament up to this point, she can tell how much these fights means to each fighter, but what they don't seem to understand is that every opponent has a family. They could have children, wives, lovers, friends. Everybody has somebody that cares about them. When they're in the ring fighting against each other, the ones they're hurting the most are actually the people outside of the ring. She asks Baki if he understands that, but Baki just says this is his only option. She starts to get upset because he's dodging the question, but he just goes in and kisses her, telling her that he might die out there in the ring. But this is the path that he chooses to walk. Back in real time, Kozue is asking Baki if that only happened because of the circumstance he was in, but Baki reassures her, saying that it wasn't because of that. He held her and kissed her because he trusts her. He says that she's the first girl that he feels like he could really trust. He grabs her again, bringing her in close and kisses her, but we just see Spec standing right beside them. Kozue doesn't notice, but Baki is locked in, laser focused on Spec with nothing but killer intent in his eyes. Spec starts to attack, but is stopped by Hanayama, one of Tokugawa's fighters, who takes him elsewhere in the park. Spec just starts chopping it up, saying that out of the 5 people on Mr. Tokugawa's side, Hanayama is most similar to the beast. He says he has one question for him, but instead of asking, he just kicks this man smooth across the face. Hanayama still hasn't said a word up to this point. He just takes off his shoes and begins ripping off his clothes as we see him pretty much naked besides this tiny little cloth. We get to see across his back this large tattoo with all these battle scars on it. We go into a flashback about the Hanayama family. This tattoo is gotten by each head of the family, and we see when Karo Hanayama got it, which is who we're seeing right now, he tells everybody that his tattoo isn't quite complete. He charged straight into enemy headquarters and took out everybody there on his own. And by the time his own team found out, he was standing there having wiped everybody out with scars all over his body. As he just says, the otokodachi, which is the tattoo that every head of the Yakuza gets, is never complete without scars. Spec is just amazed seeing this tattoo, understanding the story behind it, as he just rushes in with a handful of attacks and Hanayama doesn't even have the opportunity to respond. Spec just grabs this park bench, smashing it across Hanayama's body as he just stands there in his fighting stance. Spec wonders if he's finally gonna throw a punch, but still he remains silent. Spec just tosses out the chunk of metal that he was carrying, saying that for this fight, he's not gonna use any weapons. If anything, using a weapon just means he's going easy on his opponents. They both go into the same fighting stance as Spec attacks with his apnea rush. Spec is using his superhuman lungs to viciously attack without breathing, not giving any opening for his opponent to counterattack. But even through the apnea rush, Hanayama responds with a punch, sending Spec flying back. He's just sitting there reeling in pain from the punch that he just took, amazed, never having felt something like this before. Hanayama pulls up again, hitting him with another punch, laying him flat on the ground. He just picks Spec up, asking if he still wants to continue, but Spec says he's still got plenty of fight left in him. So Hanayama just punches him again, repeating this cycle of picking him up off the ground and asking if he's done. He does this one more time until Spec finally gives up, begging him to stop. And as Hanayama stops for a second, he shoves these explosive bullets into Hanayama's mouth, closing his jaw, as we just see and hear this big explosion. But still, Hanayama is just standing there, blood coming from his eyes, the skin of his cheeks gone from the explosion, asking Spec if he still wants to continue. He attacks Spec once more, throwing him into this pole as he's just constantly being electrocuted. We get a view back at the police station where the general is yelling at one of his men because they allowed the special ammo to be stolen. But out the back, another officer comes in saying that Spec has returned. But as they run up to go see him, it's Spec after being defeated by Hanayama. We see that the stolen ammo was the explosive bullets that Spec had used on Hanayama, and he's here returning him to the police department. As Hanayama makes his leave, he's about to get into the car as the general says to Hanayama that they owe him big time. But in Hanayama fashion, he doesn't respond. He just gets into the car as the driver tries to pull off, but as he's stepping on the gas, the car is not moving. Spec isn't finished. He's behind the car, lifting it off of his back wheels, flipping it over as Hanayama tries to escape, but he just stomps his head into the ground. He tells him that he could have possibly won if he just kept wheeling punches on him, but Hanayama is too soft. He tries to respond with another punch, but Spec just empties a clip out on Hanayama's knees as he falls right back to the ground. He continues to stomp Hanayama's head over and over as we cut to an interview of the police officer witness being asked if he thought it was game over at this point. But the officer says if it were me or you, then yeah, we would have been dead. But come on, this is Karo Hanayama we're talking about. Spec puts a gun up to Hanayama's head saying that it's game over, but he moved his head so the gun blew through his open cheek as he flips Spec over on his back, beginning a fist fight. He's just wailing these punches on the Spec to the point where even that cop was impressed just as a man. Every cop knows about the legendary brawler Karo Hanayama, but seeing him in person is just completely different. But out of nowhere, in the midst of being punched on by Hanayama, Spec covers his eyes, pulling a pin with his other hand, launching a flashbang directly in Hanayama's face. The cop goes through this entire explanation about flashbangs and how the police use them as a stun to the nervous system, but once again, this is Karo Hanayama they're talking about. He didn't even flinch. He's standing there straight-faced as the flashbang went off directly in front of him, but even though he was able to withstand it, it still must have got to him a little bit because his punch missed. Spec was able to use that slight moment of confusion to wrap his arms and legs around Hanayama, getting him in this rear choke. The officer says normally a perfectly executed rear choke would literally be impossible to escape, but once again, this is Karo Hanayama they're talking about. Nothing is normal about him. He grabs Spec's arms, using his inhuman grip strength to completely rip the flesh off of his elbow. Spec just screams, and in retaliation takes his finger, shoving it directly through Hanayama's ear, sticking it all the way in, but he didn't stop attacking. He grips Spec's throat, crushing it, as finally Spec falls to the ground, fully being defeated. Hanayama, even with his kneecaps blown off, having literally eaten explosive bullets and taking a flashbang straight to the face, just stands up, screaming in victory. The final thing that we see is a view in the hospital of Spec. The doctor said that going into it, he seemed to be at most 50 years old, but after his battle with Hanayama, his body deteriorated, and the doctors found out that his true age was around 97. This man was almost 100 years old, but within a week after that fight, his age finally caught up to him. The chief doctor is talking to another one of the doctors as he's asking if there's any precedent for this, if anything like this has ever happened, and the chief says no. Well, at least not on any official records. He then tells the story of this treasure hunter named Jack. He had been on this journey searching for this abandoned treasure ship for 30 years of his life, but one day in 1976 he finally found it. It had hundreds of boxes of these precious jewels and antiques, and this one find netted him over $15 billion. But within 2 weeks of finding the treasure, he died. It was all over the news about how this treasure hunter died after finally becoming a billionaire, as the doctors revealed that the official cause of his death was old age. This man, who had seemingly been middle-aged after treasure hunting for decades, was in fact almost 100 years old. And after finding his treasure, his old age caught up with him, as we see Spec, who dreamed of tasting defeat, has finally found his treasure as well. This show is genuinely insane, bruh. I had already heard about this show a while ago, but I could never have expected it to be something like this, bro. I don't know. The show bounces back and forth between all different storylines at once, so it's a bit confusing, and obviously there are fights that we didn't get to see finish. We didn't get to see everybody fight, but hey, this show is something, bruh. It's Baki.